The Constitution provides for a convention of states. Has anybody heard that? Yeah. Have you heard it? Article 5. That's right. But nowhere in Article 5 do you see the language saying a convention of states. Interestingly, Article 5, and I'll read it to you. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for the purpose of proposing amendments, which, in either case, whether it's Congress doing it or the states having applied for this convention, so Congress or convention, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to year 1808, in other words 1808, shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, which obviously that doesn't really apply to us now, but it was a stipulation when they put Article 5 in for when they ratified the Constitution, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage of the state. Now I will tell you there are many reasons, and people will say and claim that those who support it will say, Randy, you're just fear-mongering. Let me tell you, I am afraid. I am afraid of what will happen if this United States has a convention of states, a constitutional convention, a convention to propose amendments, whatever you want to call it. There's only one thing that the Constitution provides for in Article 5, and that is a convention. Number 2, a lot of them say, well, we're going to elect delegates, and we're going to, make sure that good people are in process of being delegates to this convention. Well, guess what? According to Article 5, get back here, the mode of ratification, well, that goes on to something else. The Article 5 does not provide for how delegates shall be proposed or elected or appointed to this convention. Number 1, it doesn't exist in Article 5. So that's one of those things where, in fact, I got to tell you, with the people that are supporting the Convention of States and saying this is what's going to happen and this is what's going to happen and we think this is the way it will be because some precedents have been set with states doing it, this is how we think it might happen. It strikes me as the language of Nancy Pelosi when they passed the Obamacare. What did she say?
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from the fog of the controversy.
We have to pass the bill to see what's in it. I'm telling you, that's exactly what we're asking for when we're asking for a constitutional convention, a convention of the states, or whether you want to call it a convention to propose amendments. There's so much in this that leaves it open to interpretation, to ability to do whatever they want to do, that in order to find out what's going to happen, we have to do it. And once we've done it, once that convention takes over, it's too late. It's just like passing Obamacare. It's too late to see what's in it. It's going. Now here's some other interesting aspects of this. And was my good friend Bruno Barron here today? Did he make it?
No, he didn't.
Okay. Well, does anybody know what was on the agenda in 2010? Not just the election of the officers and all of that here in the state of Illinois, but do you know what else was on? Do you remember what was on the ballot? There was a question. Every 10 years, that question appears on the ballot according to our Constitution. That question is, shall Illinois have a constitutional convention? Yes or no? every 10 years. It was on the ballot in 2010, whether you remember it or not or don't remember it. There was a lot of people, well-meaning people, that suggested that we need a constitutional convention here in the state of Illinois. And I got to tell you, we have probably one of the most horrible constitutions in this union. In fact, I don't know if you know it or not, there's an article in this Constitution that says nothing in this Constitution shall be construed as limiting the power of the legislature. Let that sink in for a second. You've got a Constitution that's supposed to be the supreme law of Illinois. But that supreme law of Illinois says nothing in this Constitution shall be construed as limiting the power of legislature. So it's not all powerful. The legislature is all powerful according to our Constitution. This Constitution needs to go away. It's horrible. Article 1, Section 22 is the kind of the Second Amendment of the Illinois Constitution. Although it's not an amendment, it's actually part of what they call kind of the Article 1 is basically the Bill of Rights, right? The Second Amendment for the state of Illinois says, subject to the police powers, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Can somebody tell me what the police powers are? This Constitution needs to go away. It's horrible. It's got a couple of bright spots in it. I mean, that whole definition of what a militia is pretty cool. But there's some horrible things, and I agree it needs to change. But I got to tell you, the Illinois State Constitution was ratified in what I call the dope-smoking 70s. They had to be high to pass some of the stuff that was in this thing, right? Well, let's think about it for a second. Even though it was the dope-smoking 70s, there was at least a whole lot morality back then than there is today. There was at least a whole lot more conservatism back then than there is today. If we were to have a constitutional convention in the state of Illinois, what do you think that constitution would look like now? Communism. Pretty much pure and simple. I am absolutely abhorrent, given the fact that the mores of this country has gone down into the toilet. Who is going to be the ones in charge of making these laws to change possibly the structure of this country? If we were to do a state constitutional convention to change the structure in this state, is tremendously frightening to me. Because I see the people who are trying to take control, and they scare me! And I'm not a guy who's prone to fear. I'm a Marine. I don't mind looking the enemy in the eye and taking that shot. But what I see for this country doesn't scare me because of me. It scares me for my children and my grandchildren. We ought to be absolutely fearful of who would be on that convention sitting making these laws. I know there's some, Mark Levin put out that Liberty Amendments thing, and I agree with most of his amendments. However, most of that's covered in our Constitution already. And the idea is, and here's the thing that blows me. I've gone to the website, and I've actually got the article out in the car if you want to take a look at it. The problem, they say, the problem we face is that Congress is ignoring the Constitution. That's the problem. It's in the thing. It's the problem. They're ignoring the Constitution. And yet their solution is to make a more powerful Constitution. They're already ignoring it. They're ignoring it. So let's just throw some more stuff in there they can ignore. And then, the coup de grace. We're going to trust the courts to do the right thing. The courts who passed Roe v. Wade. The courts who, when a Christian says, I don't want to sell you this cake, it violates my religious conscience to sell this cake or to take your photographs. And these courts are making them violating the First Amendment. Yeah, you want to trust these courts to do the right thing? To say, okay, maybe they made a mistake in this convention, but the courts will protect us. The courts will protect. Really? How well have they been doing that for the last 10 to 20 years? And you want to pass it to see what's in it? Finally, one of the other things, and there's several other aspects of this, but the fail-safe. The fail-safe, according to the people that are proposing that, is let's just say there was a runaway convention, which is actually what I believe will happen. There's a fail-safe that 3/4 of the states have to ratify the Constitution. And so they're not going to ratify something that makes it more horrible for this country, right? Really? How long have you been asleep? It's time to wake up and look what's going on around our country. The precedent, when they talk about precedent law, the precedents are being set. When's the last time a real conservative got elected here in the state of Illinois? We were hoping to get Chad, and I'm hoping that Tim, will make a huge dent in this process by running as a write-in. The Republican Party elected Ronner. In 2006, I ran as governor as a write-in candidate, receiving nearly 20,000 officially recorded votes with a name like Stufflebeam. Okay, I had to teach people how to spell it, right? So the election judge would at least count the vote. I got nearly 20,000 officially recorded. I was a nobody from Nowheresville that nobody knew. And yet I got that kind of response. Why? Because the Republican Party elected Judy Bartopinka, who was more liberal than Rod Blagojevich, and he's in jail! In fact, I think Quinn's about ready to head there too, it looks like.
There you go.
We have a tradition, we jail all.
That's why I said it. When I was running for governor, I'd only run one term. Second term's in jail, and I ain't doing that. But the fail-safe is that 3/4 of the states would have to ratify it, meaning 13 states would have to vote against it, basically. And the thing is, when we're seeing how many states are, giving sanctuary to illegal immigrants, how many states now have homosexual marriages, how many states are infringing on the right to keep and bear arms, how many states are violating our property rights, how many states are violating all of these rights. And you want to tell me that 13 are going to oppose this garbage as we see this thing drive further and further into the ground? People, you ought to be as afraid of this thing as I am. Because once it gets rolling, there's no coming back from it. The Second Amendment, gone. Right to property, gone. You think the UN wouldn't be interested in ensuring that they had certain representatives on this convention? Do you think that the Federal Reserve, that banking cartel of the most powerful men in the world, would you say, oh, well, let's see what happens? Hallelujah, brother! People just have no clue as to how dangerous this single idea is, because the money. I've had many good friends in this state run for office. I know their hearts were in the right place. I will take a stand for the Constitution when all others fail. And when they get swallowed up into the system, what happens? All of the Tea Party candidates of 2010, those constitutional darlings, Alan West, Michelle Bachmann, and others, I can point to you where, without exception, every single one of them have voted for unconstitutional principles. Alan West, a part of the NDAA, which says we can arrest and detain people indefinitely without a warrant for arrest. Voted for it. As long as and you're going to tell me that we can get people who have good constitutional understanding, the kind of principles, the kind of standards our founding fathers had. The United States basically understood these principles all across this land. They understood who God was. Even the guy they claimed to be a deist, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. Benjamin Franklin, he said, seeing the revolution, he said, if I was an atheist, having seen the providence of God through this revolution, I would now be a Christian. And he's the man that they all point to saying he's a deist. He basically he's not a Christian and all this stuff. But when you read the founding fathers, you see an entirely different story. And yet people who want this constitutional convention think that the people that have these mores of today, do you not think that the Federal Reserve, those banking cartels, the global elitists, wouldn't invest some money to make sure their guy was there? That's what made me afraid of the Illinois State Constitutional Convention. You think a billionaire like Ronner? How many of you have been receiving Ronner literature? I've gotten bumper stickers and I've gotten mailing. I mean, this dude is spending millions and millions of dollars, and I'm not even a Republican. And I'm getting this trash. You think they wouldn't put this kind of money to make sure that their guy was seated at the table of a convention? Do you think that all these people would just say, okay, it'll be a fair election. We'll just let this one slide, you know. We'll make sure, we'll let those, conservatives, get their little piece of the pie for a little bit, and, we'll just let it slide and see what happens. Really? Does anybody here, raise your hand if you believe that. Yeah, I kind of thought so. You guys look intelligent to me. You look like an intelligent bunch. So the idea is that you have to look at the reality and the circumstances of today. If this was the day of our founding fathers, well, number one, we wouldn't be in the condition, but let's just say we were, and our founding fathers, I trust them. I trust pretty much the American people because they understood those principles. They understood the principles of liberty. They just came out of slavery to the king. They understood it. Americans, by and large, in fact, Mark Twain, who was a humorist, kind of made it, his take on it was, it's not that the American people don't know anything. It's just that they know so many things that aren't so.